Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Nimrod Pod. I am your embattled host, Lou Stump, alongside my brother-in-arms, Mel Goodman, reporting to you live from the Nimrod Central Command Center. Before we get started, make sure you're following at the Nimrod Pod on X, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and at Nimrod Pod on YouTube and Instagram. Like and share this episode to start the chain reaction, and leave a comment letting us know what you think of the show. As always, this episode is brought to you by 50percentoff.com. 50percentoff.com offers premium wellness supplements, daily essentials, and functional formulas at prices that actually make sense for everyday people. You'll find a wide variety of trusted options for energy, focus, sleep, immunity, and peak daily performance. Right now, you can get 10% off your entire order with code TheNimrodPod. That's TheNimrodPod. Just click the link in our bio or visit 50percentoff.com/TheNimrodPod. Your support helps keep Rex Jones and the Nimrods on air. Now, we have a very special episode lined up for you today. Mel and I are going to spend roughly an hour plowing through the latest news. We're going to cover the Fishback residency hearing, election integrity, the NDAA that just passed in the House today, and more. Then, our great friend, Aaron Baker, the GOP candidate for Florida's 6th Congressional District, who is running against Randy Fine and Dan Bilzerian in the primary, will be popping in for a quick interview as we near Election Day. We have an action-packed episode for you today, so let's just dive right in to the news. Let's start off with this Florida governor's race. This Fishback residency hearing has been taking the internet by storm. I want to start off by playing a quick clip of what was going on in the courtroom just minutes before the hearing began.
Hey, fuck you. Who gives a shit? Go fuck yourself, you fucking prick.
A lot of people are going to go to prison for what they did here. And just let you know, Sean, we get to the bottom of everything that happened here. Who financed this? Enjoy self-block one. James will be an authoritarian. Yes, I will, and I'm proud of it.
Yes.
A lot of people are going to prison.
Yes.
You can go there with the team takeover guys. Sean will know how to take care of you guys.
I'm just here.
Ron DeSantis has had 52 press conferences this year. Jay Collins showed up to 2. He couldn't bother to be there for Governor DeSantis. Why would he be there for Florida voters? It's a great question, right? He said he was in the trenches with DeSantis. Why? 52 press conferences the governor said this week. Jay could only be bothered to show up to 2. It's incredible. It's really sad.
Get off giving random people the stink eye? Will you meet me outside? I'm not the one staring me down, bro. Wasting our time, wasting our money. This dude should be out on the campaign trail.
Jay Collins has not been to 67 counties. He couldn't even name 67 counties. He moved from Montana in 2019. You guys know that? He hired, these are probably some good lawyers. I like you guys. I don't take it out of you guys. But he hired lawyers from California. Nikki Haley's lawyers, by the way. Nikki Haley's lawyers to sue Governor DeSantis. Can you believe that? To sue Governor DeSantis' administration to remove a 4th-generation Floridian from the ballot.
I would have been paid well, at least.
I think so. We know where it was. I forgot to ask Jay how many sons he has to debate. He struggles with that question for some reason. Did you vote for DeSantis in 2018? You say we tried to lie? You had to say it, Tom? Voter fraud, I guess.
Yes, that verbal confrontation at the beginning there was none other than John Cardillo making violent threats in a back and forth exchange with a Fishback supporter. And cool, calm, collected Fishback sits back and dishes complete death shots at the Collins campaign, asking about his sons that he disowned, poking fun at the fact that he didn't even live in Florida in 2018 when DeSantis was voted into office for his first term. This is what's going on. Now, was it a little goofy? Did it seem a little scripted or cheesy? Yeah, definitely. But that's kind of Fishback's thing. He's the theater kid type. He ran a debate organization that basically allowed high schoolers to have open debates in the state of Florida without the guise of wokeism, without DEI looming over them, without cancellation looming over them. So Fishback is performative, and he's articulate. But this is the kind of riffraff that was going on in the courthouse. This is the kind of unseriousness that was going on in the courthouse. Speaking of John Cardillo, I think John Cardillo's back on the bottle. John Cardillo, need I remind you, is Jay Collins' quote-unquote senior advisor. In reality, he's just some fat slob, some douchebag, who exists solely on X to stroke off Jay Collins and the DeSantis administration. This was today directed at friend of the show, Chris Nelson, at Reopen Chris on X. He says, "Nope, you slob. You asked for it. You step up, you obese, cowardly freak. No one is subbing for you. Be a man. You asked for it. Follow through, you cowardly, disgusting punk. How about an obesity charity, you sweaty pig?" Then he blocks him. This is the head of the Jay Collins campaign. This is how serious the Jay Collins campaign has got. And Chris Nelson comes back at him with a great line. "Whenever John is ready to put down the bottle, I'm here to help. I know what it's like." And even media mainstream, Fishback's biggest hater, said, "Okay, this made me laugh out loud." So this is the type of tomfoolery going on at the beginning of the event. And then we get in to the good stuff. They talk about Fishback's residence in Washington, D.C. He had a property in D.C., and he also voted in the 2020 election in D.C. Let's talk about the 2020 election first. So Ann Vanderseel, friend of the show, one of our last guests on the program, says that Fishback lied to his supporters and then was forced to tell the truth under oath. Let's listen in to this soundbite.
Now let's talk about the voting documents. So you did in fact vote once in your life in Washington, D.C., correct?
That is correct.
So you voted in a state you didn't live in?
I've never voted in any other state other than Florida. I have never voted.
So the voter records are wrong.
Washington, D.C. that has no voter ID, that has absolutely no proof of anything. Yeah, I never voted in Washington, D.C. I don't know why they would say that.
Now, for the record, that was a lie. That was a lie. Do I care? Is it going to make me not support James Fishback? Absolutely not. I could care less. James Fishback then goes on to explain what actually happened. This next clip, Fishback is asked very plainly, as we saw in that clip, did you vote in Washington, D.C. during the 2020 election? I'm sorry. It was the 2024 election. Let's listen in.
I didn't. I walked in desperate because I wanted to be able to vote before the election was up, and I walked in with my Florida ID. Almost no one was there, which was interesting. And I said, "Hey, I have my Florida ID. Can I vote?" And they're like, "Oh, yes, sir, right here." And they brought the tablet out, and I signed it and voted for Trump, and then left.
If you knew that you were going to be accused of abandoning a Florida residency, would you have done that?
No.
And you, of course, did you actually know that you would be accused of that in the future?
No, because the only person I spoke to about it was the DC poll worker who I showed up with my Florida ID. and said, "Can I vote?" And she said, "Yes."
Are you aware of any DC laws that require you to update your driver's license or personal ID if you do in fact move to DC?
I'm not aware of any DC laws one way or the other.
Do you recall last time you updated your driver's license?
Would have been 2 years ago. I had to get a replacement. I went to the DMV, which is about 2 blocks from my house in Madison. One of the perks of living in a small town is no one's at the DMV.
If I could just confirm my co-counsel, Your Honor, just for a moment.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Your Honor.
ask you a question.
So Fishback explains, yeah, I wasn't a DC resident, but because there's no rules to voting, because anyone could just walk into a polling station and cast a vote, I went ahead and did that. As we know, Fishback bought a place many years ago in Washington, D.C., so that him and his sister could visit their parents. And he spent about half of his time there during COVID through 2024. Why? Because during COVID, it changed the world. Many people realized that they could work from anywhere. They could work remote. They didn't have to go into an office, and he's a business owner. So he saw an opportunity for him to live part-time with his family during the pandemic. And then in 2024, obviously, Fishback was campaigning for roles in the Trump administration. He was working with the Trump administration. He first spent time with Vivek Ramaswamy in his presidential campaign, and he was trying to stay in D.C., or near D.C. at least, so that he could be in consideration for many roles, including the Fed chair, which didn't pan out, obviously, and that's why he ended up running for governor. So this explains why he had the property. It was initially listed as a Class A property. It might be Class 1A. Essentially, this means that it is designated as his primary residence. Now, in April of 2026, this got overruled. It got overturned by Washington, D.C., because it was an erroneous error. They pointed out that it was an error, and they fixed it because it wasn't blatant. It wasn't true. So the property issue is already out the door. We know that is not going to bust him for not being a Florida resident in this gubernatorial race. The real question is on voting. The problem with the voting is that it is at the judge's discretion. Does the judge think the fact that he voted in Washington, D.C. is enough reason for his primary residence to be D.C. and disqualify him from being Florida's next governor due to the 7-year residency rule? He was in D.C., he was spending a lot of time there during the election cycle, especially election day. That's where he's going to be. And if they're not going to prevent him from voting, and if anyone could just walk in and vote, he's going to cast his vote. I really don't see any problem with that. And listen, if I'm just GOP voter number 568 in Florida, and I'm trying to decide who my next governor is, if I find out that James Fishback has a property in D.C. and he cast a vote legally in D.C. at a polling station because anybody can vote, even dead people can vote, apparently, and is that going to make me not vote for him? Is the fact that he lied going to make me not vote for him? No, I don't care about this stuff. The real argument is, are the Democrats going to use this against him? Are the judges going to have enough reason to claim that they were under the impression that at the time Fishback intended for Washington, D.C. to be his primary residence, despite what he thinks now? I don't know. I think this can go a lot of different ways. What is most damning is a signature on the voter registration form. I'll play this clip explaining what it is.
Exhibit 35. This is the stipulated exhibit, stipulated into the record. This is the voter registration application for the District of Columbia. You know when you're there?
I'm there.
So the section 13 says voter declaration. There's a lot of talk about check boxes, but it's a voter declaration right at the bottom there, the bottom right.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
And it actually says, I swear and affirm that. And one of those is that I live in the District of Columbia at the address above, the address you give, which would be in your understanding, is that would be the address that the Board of Elections would have on file.
That's correct.
And it says you do not claim voting residence outside of the District of Columbia, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact says, warning, if you sign a statement, even though you know it's untrue, you can be convicted and fined up to $10,000 or jailed up to 5 years.
That's correct.
So essentially, Fishback signs the voter registration form, claims he didn't read it, he didn't look into the laws, and it says, I swear and affirm that I live in the District of Columbia. He signs it. And there's a penalty of 5 years of jail and a $10,000 fine if you sign that, but you don't actually live permanently in the District of Columbia. Now the question is, was it an accident or was it not an accident? Even if it is or is not an accident, is the judge going to interpret it as an accident or on purpose? This is a whole charade. This is a whole game. And I'm at the point where if you are so concerned about Fishback's residency, the only good reason is because the Democrats could use it against him and use it as a way to turn Florida blue. That's the only reason that makes sense to me. If you're someone who's choosing the next governor and you look at a guy who, owned a second property, which he used to be closer to his family part of the year, and maybe he lied about it, and maybe he lied about voting in Washington, D.C., if that's enough reason for you to vote, not to vote for him, but to instead vote for the guy that is owned by corporate America, the guy that is owned by big tech, that's owned by Israel and other foreign nations, the guy that wants to destroy old Florida, the guy that wants to destroy the natural landscape of Florida and turn it into a AI data center from end to end. If you're more concerned about the residency question and you'd rather vote for the deep state globalist establishment candidate, then I think you're mentally retarded. I'm thinking that someone pushed you off of a treadmill when you were a small boy. You have a 3.5-inch dent in the top of your skull. You're permanently drooling down your shirt. You might even have a tube in your mouth. And you have 2 tiny little T-Rex arms flapping around in the wind as you walk around with bow legs and a limp. Just to make matters worse, my last little clip, and then I want to get Mel Goodman's reaction to this. The gentleman that is the star witness in this case, I can't remember his name. We'll find it later. He's essentially this journalist, this private investigator who dug into the issue. He did more research than anybody else on the residency issue. And he's their star witness. He's testifying. And he admits that Jay Collins paid him $50,000 to do all this and to show up on the stand as a witness. Let's look at it.
Who hired you to put all these documents together?
Yeah, I'm on retainer with the Collins campaign for governor.
Okay. And how long have they retained you?
Since the spring at some point. I forget the exact time, but it's sometime in the spring.
How much have you been paid?
All told, I don't know. It's probably 40 to 50,000, but I don't know for sure.
Oh, so this isn't just some rogue independent journalist doing the good work on behalf of the people. No, this is a political operative working for the opposition who's doing professional opposition research on Fishback for Jay Collins, the sitting lieutenant governor. Is this lawfare? It kind of sounds like it. It's kind of like, if the Biden administration tried to cancel, jail, and then assassinate Donald Trump, but was also running against him in the presidential election. That's kind of what it reminds me of, to be honest. This rings of this just reeks of 2020, 2024 to me. Again, this is a Montana man who shows up in 2019 to Florida, becomes quite recently the lieutenant governor, and thinks that we owe him something. He was appointed to this position. He wasn't elected. He was appointed by DeSantis, and he thinks that he just deserves the gubernatorial office. Or he's a spoiler working with Byron, and he wants to be lieutenant governor for him. It could be all those things. But ultimately, it's a Montana man who hired a bunch of California lawyers who happen to be Nikki Haley's lawyers to go after James Fishback, the guy who's broke as a joke, but has fantastic policies, is real, and is completely crowd-funded. what's going on here? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Who's right? Who's wrong? It's all up for interpretation, but I would say just follow the money. I'm sick and tired of this. I'm sick and tired of the lawfare. I'm sick and tired of the election rigging. I'm sick and tired of it all. And Mel Goodman, you were actually accused this week of being a filthy Jew on our X account. And first, I want you to address the Fishback issue. How do you think this is going to play out? And do you care about it? Does this change your opinion on Fishback? Do you think the Democrats are going to use it against you? Let's take a step back, and I want to get your take, and then let's talk about the Jew accusations after that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, well, these are the types of things that you see at the end of a coming up election cycle. These are the types of political attacks that can give you an edge or ultimately hurt somebody else. And so it is clear in writing that this was done. This was brought to our attention by Jay Collins. And as we saw in some videos before, the Collins administration, the Fishback administration do not like each other very much. But, ultimately from the Republican side, it's everybody versus Byron Donalds for the most part, at least what the polls are saying, what, this Trump staple for Byron to ultimately become the next governor. One of the three of them, Paul Renner, Jay Collins, and James Fishback, is going to have to be a standalone against Byron Donalds if they want an opportunity to even win. I think there's too much animosity between at least Jay Collins and James Fishback to make that happen, for two of them to drop out and support the other. And I think they're just going to kill each other at the bottom, and Byron's now got a freeway into the election that'll ultimately come in November. But the thing that really pisses me off about this is, while it seems minor, this is just kind of ruined, in a sense, James Fishback's reputation. In a sense, it's a small lie, but small lies can be portrayed as bigger than they are. And so I understand from Fishback's side, if someone's going to let you vote in DC, go ahead and vote. Why not? It's cool to prove a point. Obviously, the percent of blue votes that year were like 90% to 10% in DC. So his vote meant nothing. He knew that going into it. I'm not even sure if he voted in Florida, but I would assume as a Floridian he did. And that vote was closer, but not close enough for, one person to feel like, their vote's going to change everything. But small lies turn into big lies. That's where I'm a little bit afraid to see where this goes. But this lie was essential because he understood the 7-year rule in order to retain residency. And if he came out with this publicly, somebody in, earlier times would have disqualified him immediately. So it's something he had to do. And I'm not supporting his decision. But I do kind of support his dedication to, obviously, the state of Florida. This man signed a self-serving bill saying that if I let you people down, if I do not do what I say I'm going to do, I'm not going to run again. I've never heard of this before. That is the type of humility and purpose somebody really has in order to say something like that. He, I'm sure, wants a very long political career because he believes in this country and he believes that he can be the one to change it, starting in Florida, which, as we've seen, Florida really leads the pack for the Republican Party and freedom. And he'd ultimately be cutting himself short if he decided not to run again because he didn't follow up on his promises. So I like Fishback. I wish he didn't vote, although sure, it's kind of humorous, but it's just some bad attention that he's going to have to address and hopefully overcome. Not sure if it'll be this year or in the future, but I just hope this isn't going to be a lingering problem, and I'm very glad that he came out and told the truth.
Here's the thing. Any candidate running for any office that tells the truth, they're going to go through your entire life, and they're going to find something, and they're going to use it against you. James Fishback is one of the youngest political candidates in the country in these midterms. He's lived online for most of his life. There's a lot they can use against him. And just think about in a couple years when Lou Stump, Chet Lifkit, Mel Goodman are all running for office. Our entire lives, really since we were in elementary school, have been online. Everything we've ever done from our youth to adulthood is out there. It's in the cloud. It might not be in the public arena, but it's certainly in the cloud and certainly accessible if people want to go find it, if they want to go obtain it. It's not that hard to hack someone. We're kind of screwed, you know? If a young person runs for office and tells the truth, everything they ever did is going to be public. And we're getting to the point where it's clear that everyone is imperfect, right? There's only one perfect man ever. That was Jesus Christ. He lived a perfect life on behalf of all of us, for all of us, to atone for all of our sins. We're imperfect. We're human. We make mistakes, especially when we're children, especially when we're young, especially when we're growing up. You can't cancel everybody. Cancel culture is kind of dead, but they're still trying to keep it going. They're still lingering around. You know, Trump's extraditing the Tates for accusations, even though they've been exonerated every single time it's been investigated. They've never ever been convicted of doing any of these horrible acts that they're accused of, right? This is just the reality. James Fishback, if this is the worst thing they got on him, he's an angel. He's probably the most well-behaved political candidate I've seen in years, right? So at the end of the day, if you're telling the truth, your entire past could be used against you, especially if you grew up in the digital age. And I love what you said about the legally binding contract that Fishback signed, saying that he would not run for re-election if he didn't deliver on his campaign promises. This was especially impactful coming off of the first year of Trump, where Trump made all these promises. We thought we had our populist Trojan horse, our hero that was going to save the day and to crush the deep state and really change things in this country and across the world. And we got the complete opposite. We got reversal and betrayal on every single campaign promise, from immigration moratorium to mass deportations to making America healthy again, and, you know, not giving liability protection to glyphosate companies. And he let us down. And this is tearing apart the GOP, especially the entire American public, but the GOP, the MAGA Maha coalition, the independents, the common sense populist people, they're all pissed off. So when you have a guy like James Fishback that says, hey, I might wear that R on my chest, but I am Team Humanity all the way through. I am a populist. I make promises and I will deliver, and I'll punish myself if I don't deliver. Hold me to these. I'm holding myself legally accountable to delivering on my campaign promises. No one's ever done this before. He's being bold and he's telling the truth. That's a deadly combo if you're the deep state, and they're going to throw everyone at you. And this begs the question, like, listen, guys, if we don't consolidate the candidate pool, Byron Donalds is going to be coronated. Regardless of what you think of Jay Collins and Fishback and Renner, they all represent the anti-establishment wing of the GOP. And if Collins, Fishback, and Renner don't consolidate or try to squeeze each other out of the race, if people don't start dropping out, Byron Donalds would just waltz into the governor's mansion because the people are divided. And as we know, the uniparty always sticks together. The problem is we're running out of time, and in fact, it might be too late already. We already have early voting underway. People are already casting their votes. Their names are already all on the ballot. Even people drop out, you're relying on people being politically aware in a GOP primary and in a state election about who's in it, who's not in it. I mean, people aren't as invested in local politics as we are here on the Nimrod Pod, or just younger people on X in general. This is already problematic. It's looking bad. Now, if we look at Renner, I think Paul Renner is a good man, and he has really good policies. He announced he was running after Fishback, and his entire platform is basically exactly everything that Fishback ran on. Now, let's say Fishback gets disqualified. And, you know, next week when we get the results of this hearing, they say he's not eligible and he has to drop out. Do you think all these first-time voters, these young people, these independents, these Democrats that switched to Republican are going to turn around and show up on Election Day on August 18th to vote for Paul Renner? No, they don't give a fuck about Paul Renner. Even if he has great policies, even if he has a great track record and he's experienced, like Ann Vandersteel, our friend, said, it's not going to make him show up to vote. Nobody would be talking about the Florida GOP governor's primary if it wasn't for James Fishback and his energy and his motion and his integrity and the promises that he's made and the truth that he's told. He's the one that's rallying a new generation around a new political ideology. He's the one that is making promises that excite people who are not over the age of 50 voting in a GOP primary, right? So the people that would push James Fishback over the edge are not going to turn around and vote for Paul Renner if he exits the race. They're going to be apathetic, and then they're not going to show up on Election Day, and Byron Donalds is going to waltz into the governor's mansion. So it's kind of a horrific situation. We knew this was going to happen. We knew they were going to throw some stuff at Fishback. I have exclusive intel that they're going to bring out 3 to 5 incubate debate alleged victims that are going to claim that Fishback assaulted them the week of the election. All of this muddies the water. And if there are 3 guys to choose from that aren't Byron Donalds, I could see normal common sense Fishback supporters making a last minute decision based on some propaganda they saw on X. That's why we need to consolidate the governor's candidate pool and make sure it's one-on-one. If we don't do that, it's going to be tough. But again, if we're going solely off of what we see on X, everyone hates Byron Donalds. Very few people like Jay Collins. Very few people like Paul Renner. And everyone loves James Fishback. So if X equals, GOP primary turnout in Florida, Fishback will override it all. But we'll see who actually decides to show up on Election Day. And at the end of the day, I saw our friend Frank from Florida post this on X. And he said, if Florida turns blue, whose fault is it really? I'm going to play this quick clip of the Democratic candidate, David Jolly, talking about Byron Donalds.
I will tell you this, if our Republican friends in Tallahassee understood those values and practiced those values, we would not be at a point of economic crisis in the state. We would not be as divided as ever before. My bigger concern is who's allied with them to continue to control Tallahassee. Folks, there's a reason that Byron Donalds has gotten $100 million. It's not charity. It's not charity. It's because the same people who have controlled Tallahassee for 30 years are controlling Byron Donalds. That's why. That's why. The same people that got us the highest utility rate increase in American history now control Byron Donalds. The same for-profit school industry that is attacking and abandoning public education now controls Byron Donalds. The data centers now control Byron Donalds. The insurance companies, the gamblers, whatever it might be, folks, nothing's going to change in Tallahassee if the same people who have paid for it for 30 years keep paying it for the next 4. So yes, there's going to be a contrast in this race over values, but more importantly, who gets to decide how we enact legislation that reflects those values? I'll give grace to Byron in this moment. I promise you, I mean this. I really mean this. Because in some ways, he's just a vessel. He's just a vessel for the deep-pocketed interests that control Tallahassee. Now, here's where I won't give grace. He's chosen to be a part of that marriage. He's chosen to be bought. Gwen Graham and David Jolly are not bought. Listen. Byron's going to fight for the data centers. Byron's going to fight for the for-profit schools. Byron's going to fight for the utilities, for the gambling interests of the states, and for the insurance companies that keep jacking up rates on us. Gwen Graham and I are going to fight for everybody in this room and everybody across the state of Florida.
Listen, is David Jolly a woke freak? Yeah, probably. But he knows what the people want to hear, and he's delivering the winning message. He has it down. People are starving for populist leadership, especially after the great Trump disappointment. If he wants to deliver where Byron Donalds refuses to concede to his voters, Byron Donalds is going to be punished. Whether it's just to punish Byron Donalds, or it's because people actually like what David Jolly is saying. If Florida turns blue, whose fault is it? And I say it's the Republican Party of Florida. It's MAGA Inc., and it's the two candidates that haven't dropped out of the race. The two candidates that are clearly at this point spoilers. Listen, I love Paul Renner, but he's not winning. He has zero chance at winning. And him staying in this race is ruining our chance of stopping the coronation of Byron Donalds. Shame on you, Paul Renner. I've tried to get you on this show to give us your perspective because I like the things that you say, but you keep ghosting us. Shame on you, Paul Renner. Jay Collins, you're just a fat loser. You're a weirdo who's bought and paid for by the GOP establishment. I think that you made a deal behind closed doors with Byron Donalds, and then you get on stage for the debate with PBD and you say, Renner, Fishback, are you two working together against me? Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Paul Renner is sabotaging the Fishback America First movement. Jay Collins exists solely to cannibalize the America First vote so that he can be the next lieutenant governor for Biggie Smalls Donalds. Mel, you live in a state with common sense, quote unquote, Democratic leadership, a red state with common sense Democratic leadership. Where are we at in the state of the race? And do you think Florida could turn blue?
No, especially this year. In the future, sure, right? Anything's possible in the future. However, the thing that I think would keep that from happening is the young people who are, in touch with the news, in touch with X and individual podcasts and media. As they continue to get older, that means the younger population is also on that. And I think that will at least postpone for a long time keeping Florida from being blue. Obviously, there's a lot of immigration to Florida, a lot of people from the blue side going over to the red state, but I really don't see it. And if that were the case, then I would be a bit worried for America. I'd be a bit worried that propaganda and these other things are ultimately taking control of what people see. And I also don't think there will ever be another president with enough emphasis and enough followers to just simply go out, endorse somebody and blindly vote for them. And so I don't think it'll happen in Florida in the next 20 years probably. That might be a little ambitious, but if Florida falls, that means I'm sure there's some other non-swing states that have probably fallen before.
I think that's a really smart take. You're probably right. It would take a bipartisan movement against Byron Donalds that wants to punish Byron Donalds, that is backed by Fishback, that's backed by Patriot media to actually flip Florida. But it would be on behalf of the America First movement, and hopefully it could be quickly reversed in 2032. I want to add, just if we're talking about the pool of candidates in this race and how unprincipled they are. A few weeks ago, Fishback was on the campaign trail, and he saw a Byron Donalds door knocker on the ground in this neighborhood, pulled over, said hi to him. The guy didn't speak a lick of English. Fishback speaks Spanish. They start going back and forth, and he says, I'm an illegal immigrant. Guess who has illegal immigrants also door knocking for him? Let's just take a look, guys. Let's just take a look. This is a picture from Frank from Florida, our friend of the show. His wife, Football Chick Chat, she has a great Catholic podcast, by the way, about mysticism and Catholicism and the intersections. You guys should definitely check it out. But Football Chick Chat took this picture. She said, hey, some guy just knocked on my door on behalf of Paul Renner. He didn't speak a lick of English, and he couldn't even talk to me about Paul, and had me answer questions on his phone, with one literally asking, based off of what you heard here today, will you be voting for Paul Renner? And she says, hell to the no. So Byron Donalds doesn't have morals, and Paul Renner also has some clear flaws in his principles. Who's the one principal candidate? Who's the one true grassroots candidate? It's James Fishback, guys. We have to stop playing games, and it's time to consolidate. And bare minimum, let's just give Fishback a chance to show people how many votes he can gather, to show people that this is a real movement that is growing. And in every election moving forward, we as, the GOP need to start thinking about this group of people, this base, because it's turning into the base. And a significant portion of the boomers are going to be dead in 2028 and 2032. And there's going to be even more Gen Zers and younger who are going to be voting. We got to start thinking about the America First grassroots populace, the anti-establishment youth, because these are the people that will actually enforce the change, that will force the party to move. And if the party doesn't move, they'll find another way. They'll go independent, or they'll take over the Democrat Party. This is the reality. Any final thoughts on the Florida governor's race before we move on?
No, but I think it is time that I address my accusations.
Please.
So, for those of you that don't know and you don't follow the Bible podcast that we do, I always like to play devil's advocate, right? If you're going to be able to argue with somebody or understand somebody, you got to at least try and put yourself in their shoes. Whenever you humble yourself enough to at least understand where somebody else is coming from, it gives you a first of all, it's easier to talk to them. It's easier to get through to them and make points where maybe they'll agree with you. And whenever somebody agrees with you, they're more likely to agree with you on something else. And so that's where I am. I think I'm okay with that. But I think what he was referring to was me playing devil's advocate for a Christian political figure in Texas. And, I was wrong, at least in my interpretation or how I said it, but that's just me. I do my best to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm strong, at least in my own beliefs. And, I don't think that I ever speak against my own beliefs, but I'll at least give somebody the benefit of the doubt before knowing them. And obviously I do not know this guy, worth a shit.
You don't think it was your name? You think he got all the way to the end of the podcast and was like, it's that one thing he said about Christianity I didn't like. You don't think it was Mel Goodman?
Shit, I guess I didn't look into it enough.
I think you're kind of wearing it on your chest and maybe on your forehead in big bold letters. That might be it. That's hilarious. Good stuff. Well, hey, I'm glad you got that off your chest. Mel Goodman is just a family name. Goes back generations. The cavemen.
Yeah, I'm the fourth. I forgot to put the 4 after there.
The fourth, right? This is before the Jews even existed, bro. It's just a name, bro. Definitely not a pseudonym. It's a real name. If you look him up on
Mel
LinkedIn,
Gibson's
it'll
my
pop
grandpa.
up. Same. That's kind of crazy. Self-hating grandfather. Anyway, let's look at election integrity. So, little background, right? Trump has this emergency press conference last week. Or I guess it was a speech. It was like an emergency address to the nation. And he says that we've just uncovered all this information from the intelligence communities where they were hiding election interference from Trump in his first administration regarding the 2020 election. And they have all this evidence of fraud and election meddling and actually purchasing political candidates and using the Dominion machines via Venezuela to control elections all over the world. And they were hiding this intelligence from reaching Donald Trump's desk, specifically on the president's daily brief that went through ODNI. Now, let's back it up a minute. So Trump has been claiming election fraud since his first administration. This all happened on his watch in his first administration. He didn't do anything about it. He's claiming the reason is because they were hiding the intelligence from him. Then why was he so confident talking about it if he didn't have any proof? All the way to today. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast, 2024. Joe Rogan goes, hey, what is the piece of evidence you have that these elections were stolen? And Trump didn't have any answers. Joe Rogan just assumed he has really smart people that are telling him all this evidence. Trump doesn't retain all the data, but he just heard it, believed it, and kind of moved on, never really became an expert on the topic, even though that's the one thing that he's been talking about since 2020. Then Trump gets into office in 2024 after telling us that all these elections were rigged and we have to be too big to rig in order to win 2024. Then he overrides the fraud and wins the election because he was just so popular and he had this massive coalition in 2024. And then we hear rumors in November of last year where, Patrick Byrne and General Flynn were working on the inside as advisors for the Trump administration. These people have been exposing election fraud for decades. Patrick Byrne, former defense intelligence, military intelligence, he's been at the forefront of all this stuff. He's blown the whistle on a lot of the corruption of the Democrat Party. And he was brought in alongside Flynn to expose the Dominion election systems, to expose the ties to Venezuela and how Venezuela was kind of the command hub and the piggy bank for Cuba. And Cuba is actually where the masterminds were that were controlling all the elections. And when Venezuela fell, they cut off the piggy bank. And then the people controlling the elections all went downhill. And it's all tied back to China. Like, this is the stuff that Alex Jones has been talking about for 3 decades. This is stuff that, Patrick Byrne has been talking about very openly on behalf of the Trump administration on the Alex Jones show for 2 years, right? And he tells us everything that Trump told us over a year ago. And Trump was supposed to imminently release all this stuff, but he doesn't do it. And then this is when all the I'm going to fire Tulsi Gabbard thing starts, all the drama where he actually decided to fire Tulsi. He leaks it to the media, and then Roger Stone flies to D.C. to get him not to do it. Ultimately, Tulsi's still forced out after the Iran war, and she uses the excuse of her husband having cancer. He does have cancer. I shouldn't do the quotations. Her husband does have cancer, right? But that wasn't the reason she left the administration. That wasn't the reason she resigned. She was forced out. We have this from people inside, very close to the administration. So Trump's had 2 years in office where the intelligence agencies were now telling him the truth. He was actually getting all this information, and he was leaking it to the press. But not only did he not tell us about it, not only did the administration not tell us anything about all this election interference that they uncovered, they also didn't do anything about it. And they also haven't done anything about it to this day. So Thomas Massie reacts to all these calls for election fraud. I'm going to play this quick clip of him speaking outside of the congressional building.
I think it's ironic that we control the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the White House, and we're yelling election fraud. I mean, we won all the damn elections, and we're in charge, and what are we doing with it? We're bankrupting the country. We're starting new wars. We're violating the Constitution. We're not cracking down on the fraud. The problem is not the elections. We won the damn elections. The problem is we're wasting our opportunity that the voters gave us. And the Republicans are going to pay for that in November. It'll be an absolute shellacking if they don't wake up.
Right, so Thomas Massie is saying all this election integrity stuff is bullshit. If they really cared about it, they would have done something about it 2 years ago. They would have done something about it in Trump's first administration, but now they're talking about it because they know that they're going to lose because they don't have enough to override the fraud this time. Because simply the Republicans are extremely unpopular. The GOP is the most unpopular it's probably ever been. Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president in modern history. And that's why the Republicans are going to lose, right? If Trump would have just delivered on his promises, it wouldn't matter how rigged these elections are. We're going to override it every single mother freaking time. Now, do I think we should have free, fair elections? Yes. Do I think we should do mail-in ballots? Of course I don't. Do I think everyone needs to have a real government-issued ID to vote in elections? Yeah. Do I think dead people and homeless people and retarded people should be voting against their will? No. Come on. Come on, guys. I want free and fair elections, but this is a distraction. The question here is, what are they trying to distract us from? At first glance, it's like, okay, they know they're going to lose, so now they want to clean up the elections, even though they never took it seriously before. But could it be something else? Could it be something else? What does this tie into? It ties into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Trump makes this big deal about election integrity, and his message is Congress has to pass the SAVE Act. And then all of MAGA media, right-wing, normal MSM media, and all of his GOP politicians, they get all riled up, and they are motivated to pass the SAVE Act imminently because now we have all this evidence and there's really no denying the fact that we have rigged elections, so go out there and pass the SAVE Act. But what does he do? He shoves Section 219 into the SAVE Act, into the NDAA. So this National Defense Authorization Act has all sorts of things. It has a budget for the military, for the Department of War. It has some weird thing that claims that we're going to ban congressional stock trading, but it doesn't actually do that, according to Thomas Massie. And then it has this little Section 219 where Israel's military gets integrated with the United States military. So essentially, we are handing over our greatest asset, our military, our greatest tangible asset, over to Israel. We are merging our military technology and supply chain with a foreign nation against the American people's will. And they slipped this in with the SAVE Act into the NDAA so that they could pass the NDAA and so that they could merge our military with Israel. But they're claiming it's because we want to ban congressional stock trading and have free and fair elections with integrity. So the only reason that they're now taking election integrity seriously is because of the war, because they want to merge our military with Israel's, and they want to keep betraying the American people. They want to keep betraying our trust. They want to keep betraying the campaign promises that they made. So Donald Trump gets asked this question by the media. They say, are you planning on putting any pressure or consequences on China for what you announced about the meddling in the 2020 election? Here's what Trump said.
Meet, and until they're ready to meet in a meaningful way, we have no interest in even.
Mr. President, are you planning on putting any pressure or consequences on China for what you announced about them meddling in the 2020 election?
Well, we're going to talk to them about it. It took place a long time ago. I think China is maybe a little bit different today than it was then. But look, they do things and we do things to them. I'll be honest. We do things to them too. It's not a one-way street, but we'll be talking to them. You know.
Mr. President.
Yeah, you heard that right. So essentially, Trump just told Americans that China stole an election, but he's not going to do anything about it. And he expects that to build trust with the American people. This is all about transparency. I want to build trust with you. I'm telling you the truth. China stole my election and many elections before and after, but we're not going to do anything about it because that's just how it is. Trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. If we take a look at Polymarket, after Trump's infamous speech on election integrity, his Polymarket odds of passing the SAVE Act hit all-time lows. Why is this? Why does it hit all-time lows? Because he was never serious about it. Because it's not about passing the SAVE Act. It's not. It's about the war. It's about warmongering. It's about defense spending. It has nothing to do with America and saving our country. It has everything to do with preserving Israel and allowing Israel to infiltrate and occupy our federal government. That's what this is all about. That's what it's always been about. Owen Shroyer on his show today, he kept saying over and over again, what's this about? Who's this about? Do I have to say it? Who's this about? It's about Israel. It's about the Zionists. It's about world organized Jewry. That's what it's all about. All of our problems revolve around this. Yes, China is stealing elections. Yes, Pakistan does have nukes, and they might turn this Middle East conflict into a nuclear conflict. Yes, we have some adversaries in South America that we are going to have to deal with at some point. But when it comes to decision-making in the Trump administration, decisions are made for whom? Israel. Israel and their donors and their lobbies and their corporate interests. It's all about Israel. It's all about Zionism. It's all about world Jewry. It's not about the SAVE Act. It's not about election integrity. It's not about banning congressional stock trading. It's about merging our country with Israel. It's about giving Israel everything on a silver platter without checks and balances, without approval from the American people or even our legislature. And our legislature just signed it all away. They literally handed our military over to a foreign nation. Mel Goodman, I'm not sure if you watched the election integrity speech from Trump. What do you think this is all about? Do you concur with my analysis?
I think you're spot on. I simply think that that's not something he cares about right now because, the thing at the forefront is the Iran war and Israel. And it seems that that's all he really cares about nowadays. That's why his approval rating is so low. That's why people like you and me who voted for him this time, the last time, and the time before him, or the time before that, no longer believe in this guy. I still believe in the Republican Party to an extent, or at least people within it, but Trump at the top of the line, going against everything he has told us and everything he's promised, makes me feel like I don't even know where this goes in the future. Like, do I vote in party lines, or do I just vote for the people who I truly believe in, and which ultimately could, be a waste of my vote. So I have lost trust and ultimately faith in Trump. And I just hope that the Republicans can find somebody who is honest, who signs a damn, if I don't follow up on my promises, then I will never reelect. And hell, maybe I'll drop out of the midterm and let my vice president take over because I chose them for a reason, right? So yeah, no, you're spot on. I don't think Trump cares at all really about election taking. All he cares about is, this final war before he dies and aiding Israel before he dies.
Yeah. All Trump does is gaslight us. He doesn't give a fuck about us. He laughs in our face. He's at the World Cup posing with foreign, soccer players while our sons and daughters are getting sent back in coffins from the Middle East because of him, because of the decisions he made on behalf of Israel, because of the betrayal of the American people, because of the betrayal of the mandate that we handed him on a silver platter. That's what this is all about. Trump doesn't give a fuck about any of us. He is captured. Why? We can speculate. By who? We know who. Israel and their donors and the corporate interests and the globalists and the Rothschilds and all the other bankers. He is a puppet for the deep state, the new deep state, a new world order, not the same Soros world order, a new world order. And he's the one that's allowing it all to happen. He was supposed to be our populist Trojan horse, and he's betraying us. I mean, what the fuck, Trump? What the fuck? How do we have it so wrong? How do we have it so wrong?
He's a fool. He's a fool because there's a reason they're not part of NATO. There's a reason they're not part of the UN. It's because they lack, first of all, trust and historic decision making on, the great side, similar to some other European countries that we've had good partnerships over the course of the last 200 years. But he just simply lacks, I think he just lacks everything mentally nowadays. All he's centered on is this war for helping somebody that most of the people in this country don't support. And what he should have done with this new bill, I guess it wasn't really on him, but what the House and the Senate should have done with this new bill is end ties with Israel. Sure, I don't give a fuck. We supported Ukraine with billions of dollars. Go ahead, write a check for Israel. Let them self-defend themselves. I don't care if we throw money right now. I really don't. I just want us to be a part. I don't want our militaries to have any sort of teamwork together. I want them to, be able to fend for themselves. However, us not being a part of it. And while that might be a hot take, saying let's just give Israel some money so they can defend themselves because we fucked up that entire region. I think to some sort of extent that makes sense as long as we're no longer involved.
Well, isn't that the least we can ask for is that we just send them all of our money and create hyperinflation so that our sons and daughters aren't dying? Shouldn't their kids die, not ours? Because they're not our wars. They're not for us. They're for Israel, and we're just doing their bidding. It's not even a favor. We're literally doing whatever they ask. We're bending over. We're plugging our ears. We're not even lubricating our sphincters. We're just letting them have their way with us. Because our politicians are captured, because our politicians get paid off, because they're controlling our elections. Hell, they didn't pass the SAVE Act 2 years ago because they want to rig the primaries. They want to get their guys in. They want to make sure Thomas Massie can't win. This is the most unserious administration in modern history. All the other ones were serious about fucking over our country, at least. They were united against the American people. Well, whether you're a Democrat and you didn't realize it, or you're a Republican and you realize it and you felt attacked, doesn't matter. They were at least honest about all the destruction. Trump just gaslights you all day long. He says, the economy is greater than it's ever been. You just don't know it yet. Oh, I don't know it yet. I just don't know it yet. You know what? You know my finances better than me. I just don't know that the economy is greater than it's ever been yet. But soon I'll figure it out because Daddy Trump told me it's actually better than it actually is in my actual life that I actually live myself. Gaslighting. Complete bullshit. Let's hit on this real quick. You said, like, you still believe in the Republican Party. The parliamentary system is broken, right? We don't want like 1,000 different political parties, because you get the Likudniks winning the election in Israel, or you get the Liberals winning in Canada, or the Labour Party in the UK, because they get like 10, 15% of the vote, and that's just the majority, so they just win, even though it's only 10% of the population agrees with that. So it's not an actual representation of what most people think. The two-party system, I've always said, needs to be shattered into 1,000 pieces. It's better than that. It's better than parliamentary, because you can control primaries. The problem is we're losing control of the primaries. They're being manipulated. We have hand-picked, coronated candidates. They're not just doing this on the left. Like 2024, Joe Biden, nobody was allowed to run against him in the primary. He gets nominated unchallenged because they wouldn't even let Bobby Kennedy run as a Democrat. He forced him to go independent. And then when he's unfit to serve, they just install Kamala Harris without a special election or some sort of vote. That she's just appointed because the party said so. Not the people, not the Democrats, not like the Democrat voters, just the party, the DNC just said, this is our girl, and you don't have any say in it. How do you expect to win an election from your base when your base doesn't get to pick who their option is? That's just foolish. The Democrat Party can't be reformed. The Republican Party can be reformed. We've almost done it before. We've kind of done it before, but then let it slip away. We kind of did it in 2024. We thought we got all the rhinos out, and then it turns out the MAGA camp was creating a different world order that competed with the rhino neocons, and now they're like merging together against the populists who don't have any control, and they're buying up all the elections. Now they're trying to coronate Byron Donalds in Florida and not allowing free and fair primaries. But people are realizing that we can actually do something in these primaries. People are going to feel the pain after these 2026 midterms, and they're going to start taking the primaries a lot more serious moving forward when they see candidates like James Fishback doing really real damage in these GOP primaries and it validating their platforms. It's showing that these are viable platforms that can win in the future, and that the people that are voting for the guys like James Fishback, Casey Putsch, we need to start thinking about them if we're running for office, because we need them to vote, because they're a larger portion than we realized of the electorate. That's what it all comes down to. The Republican Party can be reformed. The two-party system is better than the parliamentary system. Is America ready for independent candidates? I think Bobby Kennedy showed that in the previous 2024 presidential election, but he would have split the vote with Trump. And that's where it gets tricky. So for now, I think we do have a chance to reform the GOP. That's why we need things to get worse, so people realize how bad it actually is, and it inspires them to take action. It forces them to take action. It forces them to get involved, forces them to get educated, and then actually do something about that knowledge. Take that outrage and turn it into action, not just outrage with blah, 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 sitting on your couch, jerking off, eating Twinkies in your Wally chair. No. Actual outrage turned into action, actual field activism, groundwork, knocking doors, calling people on phones, telling them to vote for Fishback or other populist candidates. That's action, right? Starting your own podcast. That's action. Going to the local PTO meeting or the school board meeting or the city council meeting and speaking truths, talking about Jesus Christ in the workplace. Like this is all turning outrage into action, being action oriented and making a difference in this world. That's what we need. The GOP can be reformed. It needs to get worse after this midterm, so that people take the primaries seriously, and then we can actually reform the GOP. But that's why the Florida governor's race matters, to show that this is a platform that people answer to. This is a platform that will grow, and the GOP needs to be wary of.
I think I used bad verbiage because I agree with everything you said there. I think the thing that I did not enunciate was I don't believe in Republican leadership at this moment in time, spearheaded by Donald Trump and his mindless supporters and voters. I do, however, believe in the majority of Republican people once Trump leaves office, because I think they'll be able to come out of this brain fog that they've had for the last, X number of years and finally be able to vote based off of values and morals and not a single person who speaks out and gaslights everybody. So I think once he's gone, I believe that, at least in this moment in time, until we get somebody else like him in the future who just blindsides us, the Republican people and the strong independent voters who believe strongly in certain things that, you know, typically correlate with the Republican Party, whether they're independents who are swing voters, which I honestly I respect very much. I think those people will be able to come together and ultimately find a good candidate that can bring the GOP back to the good days.
It's a really good point. Like, as an independent, someone who doesn't align with the party, you align around policies and you find candidates that respond to your needs. If you're kind of like this mercenary, this political mercenary who's in the middle, in the common sense, radical centrist middle, and you see a Democratic candidate you like in your local U.S. Senate race, you go register as a Democrat to vote in that primary to make sure that they get in over the establishment guy, and then you vote for them against the Republicans in the general. Vice versa with the Republican Party. If I find a guy like James Fishback, I'm a lifelong Democrat or I'm an independent, I don't affiliate with a party, I register as Republican so I can vote in that primary. I get a good guy in the Republican spot because I live in a red state and the Republican's probably going to win, but then I can vote for either one in the general. Like, this is what being a political mercenary looks like. So we can have this two-party system where, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be head-to-head, but we get to choose who gets selected as we work our way up the funnel to that final general, and you just don't align it with a party as a voter, then you can actually be really deadly. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but that totally opened up my mind to that. I think it's really smart. We need to start preaching that.
That is what I'm getting at. And this isn't really the first time this has happened with Donald Trump. This happened back with Obama when he was running. He, at least before, you know, his policy, people on the right side came to find that they agreed with him and came to find, you know, his leadership. I'm sure some of that was in part of him being a strong black man, which, you know, we need plenty of those in this country. And I can definitely see the sway from one party to another for candidates like that. And so this hasn't been the first time. It's just, I hope that, you know, with media and with podcasts and independent people not only giving their opinions, but really showing the true facts that you're not seeing on the mainstream, you know, media anymore, I hope they can make the right decision.
Couldn't agree more. Well said, Mel. Now, let's hit the NDAA. We've already kind of teased it, right? So the Section 219 merges our military technology and supply chains with Israel's. And they shove it into the NDAA along with, you know, election integrity, the SAVE Act, and this banning congressional stock trading bullshit propaganda. And they pass it under this National Defense Authorization Act for our budget for 2027. And I'll pull up Thomas Massie's tweet. This went to vote in the House today, July 22nd, Wednesday. And the final vote, 216 yeas, 212 nays. That means that there is a +4 advantage to yay, and this is passing through the House and it's moving on to the Senate. Now, this is ultra mega viral. This is just 4 hours ago. This was posted. I was one of the first people to comment on Massie's post. And I just said, it's time to peacefully assemble in Washington, D.C. This is a bipartisan issue that the American people can actually rally behind. Let's take our country back. Immediately starts going mega viral. 500 likes, 29 retweets, 28 replies. That's the big one. The people are pissed off. If you scroll on X, you're seeing people talking about protesting, starting rallies, actual action, turning the outrage into the action. This is something that people across both sides of the aisle can agree on, not selling ourselves out to a foreign nation. Go back to David Jolly, right? Is he a woke retard? Sure. I'm sure he is. Don't know a lot about him, but I'm sure he's a woke retard. But if he wants to be serious about not selling the American people out to big tech and foreign nations, that's a winning platform, and that's something we can come together on. Yeah, we might not agree on, you know, tax policy and social issues, but if we agree on not selling us out to foreign countries and not having forever wars, let's just make sure we don't get the establishment guy in, and then we'll worry about all those bullshit issues later. That's what prioritization looks like. That's what actually being serious as a political candidate, as a movement looks like. So this passes. It's moving on to the House. I want to play this clip of Thomas Massie the day before this vote. He kind of just lays out what his thoughts are on this whole thing.
House is preparing to vote on the NDAA tomorrow. I want to talk about Epstein and everything else. But first, before we get into the details of that, I want to talk about the NDAA because the big vote tomorrow. What do you believe Americans need to understand about what Congress is about to approve right now? Many Americans out national parks visiting, it's the last hurrah of summer. And quietly, sort of buried inside this enormous bill is Section 219, which, well, I'll give you the floor on what is about to happen in Washington.
Well, first of all, the NDAA stands for the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's one of the few bills that passes every year. I've been here 14 years. There have been 14 NDAAs. So you can set your clock on the fact that this bill will pass. So anything that gets in it is, dangerous as a cocked gun. It's going to become law. Well, this bill is hundreds of pages long. And, in one of those hundreds of pages, it's actually 5 pages long, is Section 219. And it was Section 224, but it's now Section 219. And it calls for the integration of our military technology and the supply chains that produce our, high-tech military equipment to be integrated with Israel's. Now, we don't have this kind of, bilateral agreement with any other country in the world. And I would argue that we shouldn't, in order to protect our sovereignty and to protect our national secrets. If you wanted to share one thing at a time, let's say, we wanted to collaborate on missile defense systems, I think that's fine. The president can do that, just by virtue of controlling the military. But what they're doing here is legislatively, they are appointing a person. I joke that this person will eventually be a cabinet member, but right now it's a lower level position who will be in charge of the integration. And that means that this project will have a lifespan that outlasts the commander in chief. Regardless of who the next president is, this provision lasts forever. And it's in the National Defense Authorization Act. It's coming to a vote. A lot of people have, saw this. I saw this back in June and offered an amendment. By the way, there are 1,400 amendments that have been offered to the National Defense Authorization Act here in the House. My amendment was amendment number 2. I was the second person to offer an amendment to the NDAA, and that's because I saw this troubling provision in there. Now, what they've decided to do is they've decided to block my amendment. So there will be no vote and no debate on Section 219 and whether it should be in the NDAA or whether it should not be in the NDAA. And today there was a procedural vote that barely passed here in the House, but it passed on party lines. I was the only Republican dissenter ultimately. Initially we had about 5 Republicans who revolted on this vote for various reasons, maybe not associated with Section 219. But at the end of the day, I was the last Republican standing opposing this procedural measure to bring the bill to the floor without a vote on stripping Section 219. What will happen is tomorrow there will be a vote on final passage of the National Defense Authorization Act. It will still have to pass the Senate. It hasn't passed the Senate. Some people are putting their trust in the Senate because it failed in the Senate once. I would tell you, never trust the Senate. Stuff over there can stay bottled up for a year and then it can pass within 5 seconds. They pass bills in the Senate using email. So I would caution you not to think that this will get stopped in the Senate. But even if the Senate passes a bill, an NDAA that doesn't have a Section 219 in it, the House and the Senate will conference their 2 bills, and it's quite likely that this could survive that conference and become the ultimate law.
So if this was, it's Israel, but if it was China or Russia, do you think that there would be any kind of outrage on Capitol Hill?
there would be absolute outrage. I mean, even if you take one of our longtime allies that has been an ally since before Israel was a country, let's say it was Great Britain, we don't have this kind of thing codified into law with a country like Great Britain. And so I think it's dangerous to take a country of 10 million people. And some people try to say this is analogous to NATO. Well, there's no real reciprocity advantage to the country with 350 million people to having this bilateral agreement with a country of 10 million people, 10 billion people. It ties you 10 million versus 350 million. It ties you into something, into engagements. And when you couple these supply chains, that also makes it problematic to try to decouple.
Super interesting. Massie says that this is permanent and lasts forever. It would take a lot for this to get overturned, just like it's taking a lot for it to get passed. You know, it has to get through the House, has to be agreed upon to be included in the NDAA. Then it has to pass in the Senate. Could they vote to take it out eventually? Sure, maybe they could. But if we look at what happened yesterday, which is this procedural vote, Massie was the only Republican to vote no, and including Section 219 in the NDAA. And then after the procedural vote, they then do not allow a vote or debate on Section 219 being included in the NDAA. Then they pass it. 7 Republicans ultimately do end up siding with Massie and voting no, voting against it, but it still passes. And this is a big problem. This has long-term consequences. He said the term, it lasts forever, and it would take a lot to get overturned. This is a big deal. And people are outraged. Like, people are willing to protest, but nobody is rallying people around this issue in a bipartisan fashion. Nobody's taking it seriously. The Patriots are afraid to organize because of January 6th, and the Democrats don't want to work with Republicans because we're all racist bigots and we're homophobic and misogynist and all that. So there's really no unifying voices that are action-oriented. There's plenty of outrage that are willing to talk across the aisle, but there's no action-oriented people that are willing to work across the aisle, except for people like Thomas Massie. And that's why he's an American treasure, and that's why it is a damn shame that he will not be returning to Congress next year. And I'll play this last clip, then I want to get your take, Mel. Byron Donalds proudly boasts that the House just voted on a bill to end insider trading in Congress and the NDAA. Let's play it.
So we just did something major on the floor of the House. Banned congressional stock trading and required voter ID in our elections. 2 for one, passed overwhelmingly bipartisan. Now it's on to the Senate. My friends in the U.S. Senate, do the right thing, pass the bill, get it to the president's desk. See you soon, everybody.
So this is the shit sandwich that they're feeding us. This is the bullshit. So Trump pressures all of his GOP Congress people to go past this because it's election integrity. So they already they have pressure, and Trump's now threatening to withhold the GOP's purse from them if they don't pass this act because of election integrity. And then he's also telling the American people, go put pressure on these Congress people. So now he has the party and the president and the constituents coming at him telling him to pass this. And not just Byron Donalds, all these crooked, good-for-nothing politicians. And he acts like this has nothing to do with merging our military with Israel. This is all just a budget for next year. We're going to ban congressional insider trading, and we're going to secure our elections. And go get them, Senate. Make sure you do the right thing, because this is the right thing to do. It doesn't even mention the fact that we just merged our military with Israel. If this passes in the Senate, then this is permanent and it'll last forever. This is what the GOP has become. This is why it needs to be completely shattered into 1,000 pieces and rebuilt on populist, conservative, grassroots, reformative principles heading into the 2028 election. Mel, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
There's just not enough fighters in politics like Massie. He's willing to say whatever needs to be said. He understands that these 100, 200-page bills have a bunch of bullshit in there that they're just trying to throw in there because, if one party wants one thing and another party wants one thing, why don't we just put them all in the same bill, right? So Massie understands that sometimes the best legislation is to actually not legislate and let things pass by. And I'm really just sad to see him go because I don't know who is going to fill his place. I don't even know if his place can even be filled. So it's upsetting because I also think it's going to pass through the Senate and it will be enacted into a law. And we have a partnership with a country that, like I said, the majority of people not only don't trust, but we don't know where their future is going to be. We don't know how much this war is going to escalate. If this war escalates, then are we now obligated to entertain the war with Israel? And at what point does the escalation of this war turn into larger and larger bombs, maybe an atomic bomb that Israel says they don't have? And that's when Russia, that's when China, that's when NATO all get involved, and something's going to happen. And it really is going to have to be, first of all, leadership change in Israel, and for people over the course of time to quit being so absolutely brainwashed by the idea that we have to save this area of people simply because of their religion. And so Massie understands, this first and foremost, and he's just one of the few people who are willing to say it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, I'm really looking forward to asking Aaron Baker about this. He's been very vocal about the NDAA. He's been very vocal about the fact that Brady Fine is all on board with this. And he's even talked with Mike Wilnaugh publicly on X about heading up to D.C. this weekend to activate, to take to the streets and voice their opinions. Mike Wilnaugh said if you see a Florida man story in D.C. this weekend, just know that he needs to be bailed out. He's doing it for the people. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And with that, let's air our exclusive interview with GOP candidate for Florida's 6th Congressional District, Aaron Baker. Aaron, thank you for joining us, brother. It's been 5 months since your first appearance on the Nimrod pod. Just off the bat, what are the biggest updates on the FL6 race since we spoke in February? I can think of one.
Well, I guess the biggest one would be we have this crazy guy from Las Vegas that decided to jump in and see if he could run a campaign from 2,500 miles away. That's the biggest update. As far as what my guys do, what we do, we just stay at it every day. For example, this morning I left the house at 9 a.m., went up to Palm Coast. We were door knocking from 10:30 until 2:30. Turned around, drove back, took a shower, and that was after 3 shirt changes throughout the day, just because, it's 97 degrees outside, and, going door to door, it is a lot. It is not fun to door knock, July and August in Florida. But that's what it takes. And the voters really appreciate that. But then, so came home, took a shower, went and picked up my, one of my volunteers. And then we went to Marion County to one of the retirement Del Webb communities this evening. And, those are just massive clubs. That the Del Webb Club there has 250 members, and they started 3 months ago. So, you want to reach as many people as you can. And the good thing about going to those clubs is those are normally places where you can't door knock. Those are all gated communities. So you have no access to those communities outside of, outside of being invited to their clubs. So it's very good. And then, come back home and 10 o'clock at night, and here I am.
Well, we're beyond blessed that you decided to squeeze us in at the end of a long day. I can confidently say that you are the hardest working candidate in these midterms. You're hitting the campaign trail harder than anyone in any district all across the country. And clearly, you just walked us through your schedule. It sounds like a lot. Now, if we look at a gentleman like Dan Bilzerian, I think Dan's gone to the district maybe one time. Let's remember, Aaron Baker is the only candidate that actually lives in the district in this GOP primary for FL6. Randy doesn't live in the district. Dan doesn't live in the district. Dan's showed up maybe one time. He keeps, putting on these events, spending thousands of dollars on them from, donations he got from his alleged supporters, and then canceling the event. I'm going to pull up this post because it's such a disgrace. You called it campaigning 101. Dan's team schedules this protest outside of Randy Fine's offices, and then nobody shows up. He creates this nice little flyer, and then it's crickets, crickets, crickets.
I mean, you don't even have one person to show up. I mean, at least you should, let's say that you were campaigning, and this will be campaigning 102. Let's just say that you were campaigning and you didn't have enough people to cover 3 different locations. Okay, well then you concentrate all of your efforts on one location. That's campaigning 102. If you can't divide and conquer, then you make the strongest possible presence where you are. I mean, they didn't even do that. At least, have 10 people and your paid staff of 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, show up so that they can at least say, hey, we showed up and we protested dying children in across the world, in Gaza, or in Lebanon, or wherever, wherever it might be. But no, just nothing. And to your point, if you look at Dan's campaign finance, you're exactly right. I mean, he has spent exactly one weekend in this congressional district. He stayed at the Hard Rock Hotel in Daytona Beach. And that was the same weekend as the Republican Executive Committee Golden Age dinner in Daytona Beach. So, I mean, he stayed right across the street. I mean, God bless him. I would too if I lived in Las Vegas and wanted to come here for the weekend. So, whatever.
Whatever is right. I mentioned this briefly. He announced this big event. Dan Bilzerian pays almost $3,000 on it. He schedules it in the wrong district, and then he cancels it. We have this other picture here. Before you address that, he creates these campaign flyers, but uses pictures from a movie that he was in years ago, over a decade ago. And you had a great analogy. You said this is Hollywood versus reality. What is Dan doing? Is he just sent here to spoil the election? Is he Randy Fine's best friend or long lost lover that's working behind the scenes to make sure that he wins? What is going on? I know you've spoke to Dan many times, or a couple times at least, before he announced his campaign. You're the guy that's been on the ground since the 2025 special election. The people in the district know you. They love you. You've done the hard work. He hasn't even showed up once. What is he doing? Is his goal to destroy you?
I mean, at this point, if you're taking the fine vote versus the anti-fine vote, the anti-fine vote needed to be coalesced behind one candidate. I mean, it's plain and simple. It needed to be coalesced behind one candidate. Can we still pull this off? I hope so. But the big question is, the poll numbers had Randy Fine at 40% and me at 34%. So anyone taking away from my percentage at all, if they'll vote for Dan instead of me, and that comes out to be 6 or 7%, then really shame on them, because there's no way that Dan breaks single digits. It's impossible. Even with the campaign mailers and such, it's impossible. The question is, am I still able to defeat Randy Fine with this imbecile in the way, or do I end up losing by the margin that Dan took away? I mean, if that's the case, as far as I'm concerned, Dan should be deported back to wherever he wants to go to. If it's St. Kitts, where he's a citizen, or Armenia, where he's a citizen, this is unthinkable, and If you were, I would have a completely different opinion if he actually said, okay, you know what? Um, I'm going to go to the district. I'm going to spend every waking hour in the district, and I'm going to go to all these campaign events, and I'm going to speak to all these different places, and I am going to have these rallies that I've scheduled, and I'm not going to cancel them the day of because of security concerns. What security concerns do you have? I mean, obviously, if you booked a venue and you paid for the catering $2,450 the day before, you didn't have any security concerns then. And what security concerns is he talking about? I mean, uh, come on now. What are we actually talking about? It's just like it's the exact same as Randy Fine. Randy Fine in Washington D.C. He's like every other representative. They walk down the steps of the Capitol and then they, walk to wherever they're going. And there's no Secret Service that leads them around or no Capitol Police or anything. But then Randy Fine gets back to the district and, he acts like, well, he has to have a police escort every time he goes, in or out of a building. So you're telling me that it's more safe to walk down the streets of Washington, D.C. than it is Flagler Beach or Daytona Beach? Come on, give me a break. I mean, this is all a dog and pony show. And quite frankly, I'm just tired of it.
I think we all are. And regardless of what you think of Dan and Dan's motivations, I honestly think him and his whole movement is a complete psyop. It's meant to sabotage our movement. But forget about that. There are people that support Dan, that support him for good reasons. There are people that are really upset with what's happening in the Middle East and the Zionist occupation of our government. And they are good people. They're not like Dan. What is your message to potential Dan Bilzerian supporters? What do you want to say to them? Because these are people that would have probably voted for you before he entered the race.
I'd just ask him to take a step back and look at the effort that has gone into his campaign. And the effort that's gone into my campaign. You pick up the phone and, anyone knows you can call me anytime and I might not be able to answer at that exact moment in time, but I'll get back to you the same day. Pick up the phone and try to call Dan. Your representative is the first line of defense against the federal government. If you need help with the federal government in any way, years ago, I lost my passport. Okay. What did I do? I picked up my phone and I called my congressman and I said, Congressman, I'm traveling in 3 days. Or it was, like 4 or 5 days. But I'm like, I'm supposed to go on a Mediterranean cruise and next week, what do I do? He's like, okay, Aaron, do exactly this, and this, and this, and this. And, 3 days later, I had my passport. But the role of your representative, first and foremost, is to be there when you need them. And if we can't get a candidate that's running to spend more than one weekend in the congressional district, then this isn't even a psyop. This is just lunacy. I mean, the madness has to stop somewhere.
There's a large, stark difference between Aaron Baker and Dan Bilzerian. Aaron Baker, you can find his cell phone number and his email on his campaign website. You can DM him on X. You can at him on X, and he'll probably respond to you. Aaron Baker is accessible, right? This is, as you said, this is what our congressional representatives are meant to do. They're meant to represent us. They're meant to be the go-between between us, we people in the Florida 6th congressional district and the federal government, the big bad federal government. They're supposed to be our allies. They're supposed to represent us. I reached out to you, Aaron, probably back in January. I just DM'd you. I said, hey, I love your platform. I can't stand Randy Fine. I'd love to give you a chance to speak to our audience. And you answered me right away, gave me your phone number, and we got you on the show, within a couple days. That's the difference between Aaron Baker and Dan Bilzerian. Dan Bilzerian will only go on his, boyfriend Jake Shields podcast. He's not doing a big podcast tour. He's not, spreading the message. He's not going to local radio shows and local podcasts and going to all these different events like you are. I know you had 3 events on your calendar today. No, Dan's been to the district once. He's not campaigning on the ground, and he only goes on a select people's podcast. Why? Because he's not serious and he's not accessible. Congressional candidates, U.S. representatives are supposed to be accessible to their constituents. Dan is not there. Dan is not that at all. And you know what? Dan, you're welcome to come on the show, but there's no chance you will. Aaron Baker comes on this show. I would have you on my show, but you're not going to come because you're not accessible.
And let's look at like tomorrow's schedule. Tomorrow I need to be in Deltona, which is kind of southwest of Daytona Beach at 8 a.m. And there's coffee with the candidates from 8 a.m. until 10. Then there's a luncheon in Flagler Beach, the Adorable Deplorables. A group of little old ladies that, the average age is probably 80. And some of the best volunteers that you'll ever come across, ever, that will sit there and make phone calls for you because they believe that you're trying to make the government better, that you're trying to do better. And then tomorrow evening, I'll be at, I think it's an NAACP event in Daytona Beach. That's what it takes to run for Congress. It is a full-time, do I want to leave my house at 7 a.m. in the morning and go set up a table and have coffee with, people from the district? Yes, I do, because those are the people that are interested, and those are the people that are voting. It's, people on X, for the most part, campaigns are not won and lost on X. I mean, if that were the case, Randy Fine would be sitting at home, and Thomas Massie would still be the elected representative. That's we're living in 2 different realities, and this is, I'm sorry, it's just not reality. The reality is you have to get out there and you have to work, and unless you're going to do that, you're simply wasting. Dan's raised, I think it was about $250,000, give or take, 239,000. Don't quote me on that number. Somewhere in that range. For what? I mean, that is a just complete waste of time, effort, and energy. So that, he can pay a $2,450 catering bill for an event that's canceled. I mean, come on, what are we doing?
Yeah, give me a break. I mean, it reminds me of the Florida governor's race as well. Like, it's overcrowded. There are people that are cannibalizing votes from the true candidate that has already earned over the hearts of their constituents. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm really excited that Mel's on because you didn't get to talk to Mel on your first interview on the Nimrod pod. Mel lives in Thomas Massie's congressional district. He's a huge pro-liberty patriot. Now, when I first spoke with Aaron, I said, hey, think of everyone in political office. Who do you model your platform off of? And you told me, Aaron, think of me as Thomas Massie 2.0. And we love that. We need more liberty and less government in D.C. Let's talk about the Constitution. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. You posted this yesterday around 9 p.m. Central Time. I'll share the screen. Slimy Randy Fine voted multiple times for red flag laws, and the Second Amendment's very clear. It shall not be infringed. Aaron, let's be very clear. Where do you stand on the Second Amendment?
Shall not be infringed. Me personally, my brother's a federal firearms dealer. So a lot of the events that I do, I'll donate a gun to the different events. And we have 3 different events coming up, one in Flagler, one in St. John's, and one in Lake County. And I'm donating a handgun to each of those because the Second Amendment is very important. If we lose sight of our rights, then we see what starts to happen. As President Reagan said in 1967, when he was governor of California at the time, at any given time, we're 1 generation away from losing our freedom. And that case has never been truer. If you look at First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, between 1967 and now, we have less First Amendment rights, we have less Second Amendment rights, and we have less Fourth Amendment rights. And those are all issues, thankfully, that people are starting to wake up on. And it seems to be a combination of really the Fourth Amendment, where people are really noticing the flock cameras that are bringing light to the gradual infringements of the First and Second Amendment over the last 50 years. And I'm glad that people are starting to wake up and see what's going on.
What do you think is the solution to flock cameras? Ultimately, the flock cameras are just the tip of the iceberg. The surveillance state is so much more comprehensive than that. And the AI data centers tie in. They are the physical infrastructure of the control grid. But also we have these cell phones that are listening to everything that we say. We have no AI rights. We perhaps we need an AI Magna Carta. What can you do from Congress to deal with those flock cameras?
Well, the easiest thing is the AI Bill of Rights, and that needs to reinforce the Fourth or not reinforce, but reaffirm the Fourth Amendment, because when our founding fathers wrote the Bill of Rights, you are supposed to be secure in your person and papers. Okay, if you had a camera that okay, so let's say something that I don't have a problem with. Okay, if you go through a toll booth in Florida, now they're all paid by plate. If it takes a picture of your plate and that's it, and no other information is collected, I don't have a problem with that, because you do have some expectation to lose privacy when you're in public. Okay. But where we have a problem with that is that they take a picture of my truck, and then they also take a picture of my bumper sticker, and they put a timestamp on that, and that goes to the AI data center, and the AI data center says, okay, well, guess what? Aaron's probably on his way to Flagler Beach right now, or Aaron's on his way to Daytona Beach. And, based on at what time I drove that route last and how that corresponds to what time I'm driving that route now, then they're predicting where I'm going at that exact moment. And this is crazy. I mean, our Fourth Amendment is being absolutely trampled on.
It absolutely is. I think the entire Bill of Rights is important. The entire Constitution is extremely important. It's the bedrock of our republic. But the First, Second, and Fourth are really under siege. And I'm so glad you laid out where you stand on each of those, because I think these are the issues that matter the most to, the average common sense, right-leaning voter. We talked about Randy, talked about Dan. I want to play this quick clip because the Florida 6th Congressional District was mentioned in a recent interview with Tucker Carlson and Alex Bruesewitz, and I'll just let this play.
And President Trump didn't endorse Dan Crenshaw. So we've used this primary.
He didn't endorse that creepy fat guy from Florida who endorsed genocide, who laughed at a picture of a dead child in Gaza, that disgusting, I can't even remember his name, but he
was the only candidate that ran in that seat.
Why not get someone new? Like, why would you endorse that guy? That's why I said you've got to be a slave to Israel.
But now we have the flip side. You have Dan Bilzerian, right? We have two extremes running that race. Both I don't agree with, okay? So we have Dan Bilzerian, maybe one of the people who's helped bring degeneracy to young men in America more than anybody.
I don't know about that.
And Randy Fine. Maybe we need some better choices.
There is a better candidate, Alex, and his name is Aaron Baker. His name is Aaron Baker. I think there's a lot of people that despise Randy Fine. I think Randy Fine is probably the most evil man in Congress, probably the most hated individual in Congress. There are people all over the country that would do whatever it takes to make sure he doesn't get elected, but they might not know about Aaron Baker. Hell, Tucker Carlson, Alex Bruesewitz, two of the most powerful people in our movement, don't even know that you've been in the race since the 2025 special election. What is your message to them?
That is simply not true, because even when James Fishback was on Tucker Carlson, James brought up, I've endorsed Randy Fine's opponent, Aaron Baker. And, I know that there are people on the national stage that know who I am. I mean, I reached out to the House Congressional Caucus because that's what you're supposed to do as a candidate. And they're like, well, you're running against an incumbent. We can't help you. But I guarantee you that they know that I'm in this race. And, even as far as let's go to Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie knows that I'm in this race. Okay. I wish that I could get some, a little bit of help down here.
Yep.
But a lot of these people know that I'm in this race. They just don't want to, they don't say anything. And why? I have no clue. It seems like the fix is in Congress. But, I can guarantee you that a lot of people know that I'm in this race. I can guarantee you that President Trump knows that I'm in this race.
Yeah, and Aaron, speaking of James Fishback, I have a question kind of about policy and kind of where your head is at in terms of, everybody says they want, government to be honest with them. They want to know the truth. But then there's the perspective where sometimes it's better that the people don't know for their own safety, for their own, belief in the system, right? So that's all rationalization. And with James and his recent encounters with the media, with the accusation that he voted in DC and then lied about it and then had to, in hindsight, say the truth about it. I would consider that some sort of a white lie, right? You have to have 7 years, to be a member, to ultimately go into Congress. You have to be in Florida for 7 years prior,
Governor.
and then he goes into vote in DC. So where does white lie correlate to somebody who is willing to, take that a step forward? And how do you view white lies and lying at all in Congress? And, do you think we have too much of that right now for the American people to ultimately not understand what's really going on and not have their opinions voiced?
Well, okay. So if we go to the Fishback case specifically, in his apartment in DC, if you look at the utility bills, they were never what like the neighbor's utility bill was, because he was not staying there. And I think the utility bill more than anything else kind of proves that point, because like if I'm not here, I turn the air on 80 degrees. If I am here, the air's on 70 degrees. Okay. So, I have a drastically different power bill if I'm here or not. Back growing up, my grandparents, because of tax reasons, they lived in Florida, but then they had a business in Kentucky. And they kept a journal every year of how many days they were in the state of Florida. And they, would make sure that they were in Florida for at least 183 days every year, so that they could say, okay, we spend most of our time in Florida. Could James be more careful? Anybody could be more careful. Voting in DC, well, the best thing that I can say is that really gives you a very good snapshot of why we need to pass the SAVE Act, because these people never clean up their voter rolls. I guarantee you that if you pull up James's voter eligibility in Washington, D.C., he's probably still eligible to vote in Washington, D.C., because these places do not clean up their voter rolls ever. Same thing for me. If you go back to 2022, that was the last time I was in Maryland. Okay. But when I go to the Maryland .gov election website, guess what? I'm still registered to vote in Maryland. And if I pull it up, guess what? It says no ID required. In Maryland, you literally walk in, no ID, you tell them your name and give them your birthday, and that's all that it takes to vote. So, you could walk in to a voting location in Maryland, say you're Aaron Baker, give them my birthday, and vote. I think James made careless mistakes, because At that point, he didn't ever think that he was going to run for governor. If you asked me 2 years ago, before the presidential election, and you told me that I was going to be on my second congressional run now, I would have told you that you were nuts. I would think that we were on a different planet. So, I think life happens. Sometimes you're not as careful as, per se, my grandparents that kept a journal of, okay, we're in X city on this day, we're in Lake Wells on this day, we're in Lake Wells on this day, so on and so forth. Um, Sloppy at best or sloppy at worst, but you know, as far as a white lie did, I don't know. I mean, I can't speak to anybody else. I can tell you that, you know, I'll go to Congress. I'm not going to trade individual stocks. And I'm going to do the things that I've said I've done. I will vote for legislation to make elections so that only Americans can vote in elections. I will sponsor the legislation that I've promised to sponsor so that we have some type of fair tax. And I will remove every regulation from the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms that I can possibly remove. Those are things that I've said I will do, and I'll go to Washington and I'll do that. I don't think that politicians should go to Washington as the front runner of Florida's gubernatorial race did 5 years ago, worth $80,000, and now you come back 5 years later and you're worth $6 million. I couldn't even dream of having that type of return on investment, and it just never ends. Never ends. I mean, we have one of our senators in Florida is one of the wealthiest people in the Senate, and he'll probably pass, within his term, he'll probably pass the $1 billion mark of net worth. And, heaven forbid, we can't take away our individual stock trading. Well, why not? At what point is enough enough? Our government is so broken, and it is run by, we're not at the point of a republic at this point. We're at the point of government of the exact same thing in Russia, where you have oligarchs running the show. And that's where we stand as a government right now, and that has to change. We have to get the power back to the constituents that, or the people that are elect our representatives.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. That makes sense. In order to avoid these white lies and any lies that could come about in the future, it's about planning ahead of time. It's about making sure that you have documented 183 days in Florida to ensure your residency there. So that makes perfect sense. And from a Fishback perspective, I'm a big Fishback fan, and I was a huge proponent of him signing that document saying that I personally will not run for re-election if I don't do what I said I was going to do. And I guess I'm curious, do you think signing something like that makes sense, or is it more so like I want to make the point that I am truly, everybody says they're going to run, and fulfill that, but what we've seen with President Trump is the opposite of that, right?
Oh,
so do you think that document? Yeah, go ahead.
I can show you stacks of things that I've signed where, you've got the Americans for Fair Tax Pledge. Okay, you've got the term limit pledge. I hate to tell you, none of that means a frickin' hill of beans, because you have the exact same people, Randy Fine, that signed the exact same term limit pledge that I signed. And what has he done about it in his first year and a half in office? Nothing. These people do not care. They will do anything. They will say anything to retain power. That's the unfortunate point at where our country is right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're someone who's going to tell the truth and be bold about it and put your signature in big, bold letters on it, the system's going to come after you. They're going to dig through everything you ever done and release it to the public to try to sabotage you. And if that's the worst thing they can find on them, then it's a whole lot better than whatever Byron Donalds was doing with Corey Mills overseas and all those pictures of them partying together. It's a whole lot better than selling out our country to a foreign nation or big tech.
You know, I mean, but that's the problem. When people like Randy Fine sign the term limit pledge saying that you will propose and that you will co-sponsor legislation, and then they go to Washington and then they don't, there's no accountability for the elected people. But, you know, I mean, you take somebody like Fishback and, oh, well, you know, I'm sorry I didn't keep a journal of 183 days in the state of Florida, you know, well, I mean, and they want to send him to the firing squad. But you take people that have actual power at this moment in time that are elected, and they don't do what they say, and there are no repercussions at all. None.
Absolutely. While we're talking about Fishback, again, Aaron Baker is the only candidate in any race all over the country that is Fishback-endorsed. Let's not forget that. So it's no surprise that he's on board with signing a legally binding contract or signing these different pledges saying that, hey, I'm going to deliver on these promises I'm making because I actually have an ideology that makes sense that I agree with. And let's talk about what's going on the ground. Our friend at Real Frank from Florida on X, great follow, he said that if people on X voted in the GOP primary, Fishback would win in a landslide. You could say the same thing about you, Aaron. How does Fishback's support on the ground in your district in particular compared to his online support?
That's the $1 million question. That is the $1 million question that none of us know the answer to. You know, I've been at events with James where, you know, we've been at the University of South Florida in Tampa, and that venue held 600 people, and there were still people who couldn't get in the door. I've been at James at the University of Florida where, you know, that event held, I don't know, 400, 450 people. And I can't remember. I counted the chairs and I posted something about it at some point, but I can't remember the exact numbers. Where people were lined out in the hallway. In my lifetime, I've never been at an event. If you remember back when we had a cold snap in Florida, when it was like 30 degrees and, you know, 25 degrees, James was doing an event in Volusia County. And we went to the event, myself and, you know, there are quite a few of the locals that went. And at any given point in history, and I've been around politics for a very long time. My grandfather worked for President Nixon. I've been to Bush Quayle rallies back in the day. I've seen President Reagan in person. I've been to Trump rallies. I've been to, you know, worked in 2 different gubernatorial campaigns in Maryland for Republican governors. I've been to every type of rally possible. I have never seen people standing outside of a restaurant looking through the windows in the freezing cold, not to hear what James is saying, but just to be able to get a glimpse of what's going on. I've never seen it in my life.
Yeah,
I mean, not on a state level. I mean, you know, you talk about, you know, people lining up for hours to see President Trump. Okay, well, that's President Trump. I've never seen it on the state level.
Right. Fishback is the candidate with the energy, with the motion. People wouldn't be talking about the Florida gubernatorial race if it wasn't for James Fishback. And Renner's in the race because he thinks that Fishback's ineligible, and he's just waiting for Fishback to drop out so that all the Fishback supporters can come vote for him. If Fishback's not on the ticket, those incremental voters, those first-time voters, those young people, those independents, those former Democrats that were going to vote for James Fishback aren't going to turn out on August 18th for a GOP primary. Fishback is the movement. Renner and Collins are spoilers, and people need to start realizing that. Like you said it yourself, the turnouts he's getting at these events, the excitement, it's unmatched, and we haven't seen anything like this since Trump 2015, 2016 campaign. My question, do you think, one, that anyone's going to drop out before the 18th in the governor's race? And two, do you think DeSantis is going to get involved? Will he endorse a candidate?
Okay. First question first. Is anybody going to drop out? No. You have to realize at this point there are mail-in ballots already being returned. Okay. The supervisors of elections, the supervisor of election in Volusia County sent out 60,000 mail-in ballots. Every single one of those mail-in ballots had James Fishback's name on it.
Yep.
About half of them, the 6th congressional district portion, had my name on it. No one is going to drop out. Specifically in June, I was at an event in St. Augustine with Paul Renner because Paul's from Flagler County. So, our paths cross quite often. And I said, with all due respect, the effort has to combine in order to have a fighting chance at saving the state from Byron Donalds. It has to. And the answer is always the same. Well, we're going to fight. We're going to fight. Well, that's great. But, I was originally a Jay Collins guy. And then Jay Collins came out and, I was promised very early on that this was going to be a campaign like you have never seen before. It was going to be, rainbows and sunshine and puppy dogs. And, it was going to be the second coming. And, then Jay Collins announces that he's running. And it's like the biggest flop ever. It's like you go to the fireworks store and you buy this $1,000, huge Roman candle, and it turns out that it's just one Roman candle, and that's it. And you're like, boo! And that was the Jay Collins campaign. I have never in my life seen a worse run campaign ever. The thing that bothered me with Jay though was the infringements on free speech, and then also the fact that he says he has 2 kids when he has 3. So anyway, done with Jay. And I was talking to one of the party chairmen, and I'm not going to say which county because this will get them into trouble. But he said, Jay keeps sending us all of these signs. They'll keep sending us like 100 signs every week, and nobody wants them. What do you want us to do with all these signs? And, Paul Renner is a good man. He is a good man. He's a good family man. With all due respect, he doesn't stand a chance. There needed to be a more cohesive effort from the get-go to take down Byron Donalds. And, this idea that we're already having mail-in ballots returned, and early voting starts in 16 days, 17 days. This is nonsense. This is a recipe for Byron Donalds to just basically walk in. And at this point, he's not even going to need 50% of the vote. He's going to need, I don't know, 42, 40%, somewhere around in there, because everything else is just going to be jumbled. So be like, yay. Then what do we do? Are we all going to get behind Byron Donalds? That's the $1 million question. Do we get behind the guy that used to be a Democrat, or we get behind the guy that used to be a Republican? And, there's serious questions on, I don't know. And the one thing that I'll say that Paul Renner is 100% right about, he said, I have never seen a statewide race where there is zero grassroots support. And he is 100% right. There is no grassroots support for Byron Donalds. When you talk to any of these groups that I go to, they say anybody but Byron Donalds, anybody but Byron Donalds. I was talking to a lady tonight that she had called me, and she's like, Aaron, anyone but Byron Donalds. And that's the sentiment on the ground. But it doesn't do any good that we've got, you know, if you want to include Bobby Williams, we've got Bobby Williams, Jay Collins, James Fishback, and Paul Renner that are all just stepping on each other's feet. They're not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. And they had one guy that was able to engage the entire country, that was able to get everyone to feast their eyes on this race. And so
And
I
if
think
somebody would just swallow their pride, just say, okay, you know, I get it. You know, it's not going to happen. It has to be a domino effect of, okay, even if you wanted to say, Paul, you know, if Paul said, okay, you know, I get it. I have the support here, here, and here, and he does have some support across different places. But is it enough? No, it's not enough. Jay Collins' support is non-existent, and James, he has the support of everyone that's under the age of 30 years old. And the $1 million question is, are they going to go turn out and vote? And I pray that they do, because it will be the next generation that no one counted on to save this country, if that's possible.
And Aaron, you mentioned that there's very little grassroots support for Byron, but you are the grassroots man, and you have the grassroots support, and Lou and I support. And the question I have for you is, you know, this election is it's almost here. It's 3 weeks away, 4 weeks away, and so for you, we can tell you're vigilant, you're proactive, you're an active listener, and you're tenacious. You're out door knocking hours a day, and then you come back and at 10:45 you're on a podcast. So if all things don't work out in this election, what is the next step for you? Or where are you going to take your tenacity to?
Maybe James and I'll write a book.
All right.
I don't know.
I'll read it.
I don't have the answer to that. Maybe we'll start a podcast and see if we can go around the country and drum up support amongst the next generation. I don't know what.
Well, really, all that I want, I just want to keep hearing your voice. That's what I want.
I don't know what the end result is going to be, but I pray a lot. I pray every morning. And some days it is a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle. You rely on donations for your campaign to continue moving forward. And, it's an expensive venture. It, takes thousands of dollars. And it's, I don't know. I don't know. Many years ago when I worked for Governor Ehrlich in Maryland, after Governor Ehrlich was defeated, I just kind of felt politics just kind of fell by the wayside because I felt very defeated until Governor Hogan came along in Maryland. And I didn't really get back into it for about 20 years. So I don't know what the next chapter holds one way or the other. Well, I mean, obviously one way. It's going to be, we're going to have the most fun district in Florida. People are going to get tired of seeing me on the ground in Florida. But the other way, I don't have the answer.
I love it. That's awesome.
Fantastic. It's getting late, so I want to wrap this up with one more question. I've seen you talking about this on X, Aaron. As you know, there was a final vote today on the NDAA in the House. It passed. The yeas won by 4 votes. And, there is a section here, Section 219, that essentially merges our military, technology, and supply chain with Israel's. This is now being sent to the Senate. And if it passes there, then we are permanently, forever, intertwined with Israel. There's no checks and balances. They get to do whatever they want. They don't have to ask for things. They just take them. They have all of our secrets. There's no more security. We are one with Israel. My question to you, Aaron, is let's say this passes. what, one, like, let's get your immediate reactions. And then two, if this passes, will you make it a priority to reverse the effect?
Absolutely. I will introduce the repeal, the NDA 219 Act of 2027. And that would be one of the first pieces of legislation that I write. And I can guarantee you that piece of legislation will be ready to go day one, because the people that I know that have the ability to write that legislation, they're working in Congress right now. And those people that have the ability to write that legislation, they will come work for me, because they've already told me that they will come work for me. And, that is unacceptable. We are a sovereign nation. We don't share our sovereignty with any other nation on the planet. We have made it 250 years. And if you're telling me that at our 250th mark, that we're losing our sovereignty to share our defense with another nation, we don't even do this for Canada. Okay? Canada is our closest. If somebody wants to say, who is your closest ally? Canada. That's the answer. Canada is our closest ally. Okay? We've never had any incursions between the two of us. We share the North Atlantic. We share NORAD with the Canadians. Okay, there's U.S. troops there. There's Canadian troops there. We share intelligence there. Okay, but we have never gone to the level of taking a foreign nation and saying, okay, we're intertwining our intelligence, we're intertwining our logistics, we're intertwining our production. We have never done this. This is madness. I don't care if you are the biggest supporter of Israel on the planet. How does this make sense? I mean, how does this make sense to Americans? I don't get it. And it's because, you go back to one thing that I say all the time. If you go back to USC 601, and it very clearly states, FARA, engages within the United States in political activities for or in the interest of a foreign principal. I mean, it's very obvious to me that AIPAC needs to be registered under FARA. The reach of AIPAC has gotten out of hand, and I think that there are enough people waking up. I mean, obviously this vote was 216 to 212. So you're really only talking about two votes. There's two votes the other way. There's 214 to 214. I think that people are waking up to see, but we need men of principles. And when I say men, that also includes women. Okay. I got in trouble for that the other day. But we need principled men in Washington that will fight the battles that need to be fought. And I don't understand how we're giving up our sovereignty for what? What do we get out of this? And the only answer of what we get out of this is that our politicians get paid off. That's it. There is no benefit to the United States of America.
While we're on the topic, Thomas Massie has been one of the only Republicans fighting against Section 219 when they did a procedural vote yesterday on whether or not to include Section 219 in the NDAA. He was the sole Republican to vote against it. And today, 7 Republicans were convinced to vote against the NDAA. Regardless, Thomas Massie has the highest liberty score in Congress. He's the only congressman that we can count on every single time to rule in favor of liberty, to rule in favor of our absolute rights, God-given rights from our Constitution. Are you willing to be the sole Republican voting to, protect children,
uphold the Constitution?
To uphold the Constitution, to release the Epstein files, to demand that we declare a war in the Middle East instead of giving the president absolute power? Are you willing to be the sole man in Congress that stands up to the party when it's the right thing to do?
Yes. I was asked the question, earlier in the week, will you support the president of the United States, or will you support President Trump? And my answer was, as long as it's constitutional. And they said, well, that's kind of a silly answer. That's not a silly answer. That is the answer. The answer is you will support, go back to George Washington, 1796, in his farewell address. He said, the downfall of the United States will be loyalty to party over liberty. That is the point that our country is at right now. I don't care if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're purple party, if you're blue party, whatever you want to call yourself. If you want to do something and it's constitutional, let's say the Democrats have a bill where they want to work on infrastructure. Sign me up. I'll be the first one there. Okay, great. We're 15 to 20 years behind in this congressional district. Sign me up. I don't care what party you are, but we are at a point in this nation of exactly what George Washington warned about in 1796. If I need to be the one Republican that stands out and yells and screams and says this is unconstitutional, then that will be me.
They sent hundreds of millions of dollars to oppose Thomas Massie in his congressional district in Kentucky. Back when Trump was telling the truth, they tried to cancel him, they tried to jail him, they even tried to kill him. Standing up to the establishment and being principled comes with a lot of risk. Are you prepared for that risk? Have you thought about it? Do you have any fear?
I don't. I don't care. What do I have to lose? What do I have to lose? A country. That's it. I mean, the only thing that I could possibly lose is my country. Am I afraid of, somebody's going to come shoot me? Okay, whatever. If anything ever happens to me, just and you can take this down as a note, my preferred successor would be Mike Wilnow. Okay. So there you go. No, but I mean, we're at such a point right now where I don't have anything to lose. Okay. I know that our government is not doing its job. I know that the laws that are on the books in different states are not being upheld. Let's take a very simple law that's on the books in Florida. Okay, the maximum interest rate that you can be charged on any loan in the state of Florida is 18%. Did you know that? Okay. How many people in the state of Florida, out of 23 million people, have a credit card that has an interest rate higher than 18%? 22 million of them, okay? Because even an American Express Platinum card has, an interest rate of 27.99%, okay? So why are we at a point in our government where the government is not doing its job? Government has one job: protect its citizens. That's it. If you take everything and you boil it down, what is the government supposed to do? It's supposed to protect its citizens. That's it. And they're failing. So what am I scared of? I'm not scared of a damn thing. Some idiot tonight now, somebody sent me a post where they're saying that I'm Jewish. My grandmother's Puerto Rican. My grandfather's side of the family is Irish. My mother was a redhead that would burn in 2 seconds in sunlight. And fortunately, my grandmother's side of the family was from Puerto Rico. I'm like, if you wanted to say I was Catholic instead of, Southern Baptist, okay, that would be a believable story. But we're at a point now where people just make up anything and everything. And there is no there's no consequence for it. And that goes back to the whole AI thing, the whole AI Bill of Rights. But got a lot of problems in this country to fix.
And I think you're the man that can actually make a difference. I think you're the guy that can carry on Thomas Massie's legacy. You're the guy that can put the target on their back and say, come and get me, because you fear God, you're principled. And like you said, we don't have another country to flee to. Mike Wilna, I saw him arguing with a Jewish man on X this week, and he said, I don't have any other country I can go flee to. This is all I have. You might have somewhere to go, but this is all I have. And that's right. If we don't have a country, then all these other things that matter, like, our family, our children, our loved ones, our jobs, none of that matters if we don't have stability in this country, if we lose our liberty, if we lose our republic. So we do need to take action. No one's coming to save us. We need to take our country back. And you're one of those average, everyday people that is stepping up for us, for people like me and Mel.
I'm just the guy that's fed up. I'm the guy that says, okay, our government is supposed to protect us, and our government is failing at every turn. They're not protecting our First Amendment rights. They're infringing on it. They're not protecting our Second Amendment rights. They're infringing on it. If I want to go buy a cannon, technically I should be able to go buy a cannon. Now, it might seem a little odd living in Sorrento, Florida, but I can guarantee you that if I had a cannon, my brother and I would go out to the range and we would be able to have a lot of fun on the weekends and shoot our cannon. It's just stupid things like that. And the Fourth Amendment violations, there are so many Fourth Amendment violations. Just driving through the Ocala National Forest tonight, and you'll come to an intersection and you'll see a flock camera, and you're like, I'm in the middle of the Ocala National Forest. Unless you're trying to figure out how many black bears go through this intersection, why is this camera here? Do you really need to know which way Aaron turns off of, 452 in Lake County? No, of course not. And that, we haven't even got started on the 10th Amendment. Geez. I mean, that could be another 3-hour program. Anything not granted specifically in the Constitution or Bill of Rights to the federal government is the responsibility of the state or local government, or it's an individual responsibility. There are so many things that the federal government does now that they have no business being in, the Department of Education, for one, the Food and Drug Administration. Where did all this nonsense come from? The Federal Reserve, when did this country start to fall apart? It's 1934. It's been downhill ever since. You look at when did our currency start becoming less valuable? Well, when we couldn't figure out how to balance a budget, and we just started saying, okay, well, we're going to take us off of the gold standard and we're just going to start printing money. The federal government has to stop freaking printing money. It is, I'm at a point I just want to throw my hands up in the air, because there's so many issues that we have to fix on a federal level. And it's not going to take just Republicans. It's going to take a bipartisan effort for us all to work together and say, dear Lord, we have got to fix this, and we have got to fix it now. Social Security. There's not another congressional candidate out there talking about Social Security goes bankrupt in 2032. The average voting age in my congressional district is 51 years old. Okay. I have 60% of the Republican primary voters that are on Social Security currently. If we don't do something in the next Congress, then there will be between 22 and 25% cuts to Social Security. So guess what Republicans are going to have to do, or whoever the next Congress is, they're going to have to raise the amount that Social Security is taxed at. Right now, if you make $3 million a year, you're paying the same as somebody that makes $60,000 a year. That is going to have to go up to $330,500 a year in order for Social Security not to go bankrupt. The government took the money from its citizens. The government used it for different purposes. The government is the biggest thief of all. If you look at the average Floridian right now, their Social Security payment is $1,871 a month. If you take what they paid into Social Security over that lifespan and you put it in the S&P 500, just over, their average return, each of those recipients would be receiving about $5,400 a month right now. The federal government is the biggest thief of all. And somebody has got to stand up and say, this nonsense, this madness has to stop.
It does.
Sorry, guys. I don't mean to rant and rave, but I mean, I could, it's crazy.
I could talk to you forever. I could let you go for forever. I mean, you're so interesting. You're saying everything we want to hear. It's so refreshing. It's so exciting, and it gives me a lot of hope. You've been really generous with your time. It's been a super powerful interview. Let's wrap this up. How can our audience, everyone watching across the globe, support you right now?
FLAaron.com, FLAARON.com. Very easy website.
FLAaron.com. What do you need most right now? Do you need money? Do you need people phone banking? Do you need people knocking doors in the district? Do you need people talking about you on social media? How can people help? What are some examples?
All of the above. If you want to help, click on the contact page. You can call me, you can text me, you can email me. You can text the number right there, 407-920-4530. Text me, and we will set you up. I have one volunteer. She's the best volunteer in Lake County. Her name's Vera. She is 96 years old, and of course she cannot do door knocking, but she will make as many phone calls for you as you want. So I mean, I have people doing everything, whatever you want to do. We need the help, and of course, money always helps. I think that if we can pull this off, you're going to see a very drastic change in how campaigns are run going forward.
Absolutely. That's how you run a grassroots campaign. Anyone that's willing to help, come on in. Whatever you can do, we're in this together. I mean, that's how you lift people up and get through the finish line. You can also follow Aaron on X at Aaron4FL6. That's AARON 4FL6 to keep up with the latest on his campaign and what's going on in Florida's 6th congressional district. Aaron, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you forever. Such a powerful interview. I'll sign us off. Then I want to say one more thing to you. To everyone watching, God bless you all. We want to thank 50percentoff.com and Rex Jones again for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
God bless.